Good afternoon, Asia Sky Media here, Mikami. We have Jeffi Girgenti here.
Hello.
You're running this time in District?
I'm running for LA County Supervisor, District 3. We're in Santa Monica right now, and this is my district. I have the second largest district for the LA County Supervisors, and my district is 2.1 million people. It's a huge district, and it goes from the Ventura County line of the Valley to Ventura, from Chatsworth all the way to Santa Monica, all the way to Malibu, from that county line all the way to Pacific Palisades. Then it cuts up, it catches Beverly Hills, it cuts off at Studio City. It goes up everything east of the 210 all the way to San Fernando, where I was born, and then it goes all the way down the 118. So I was born in my district. I've had several businesses. They've all been in my district. I live in Woodland Hills. And so it's really important to me that we handle all the things we've got going on in our district, which is homelessness. It's the overbuilding. They want to remove small houses. They passed SB 9 and SB 10. And that means that they want to take small individual houses and put apartment buildings up with no parking. And these are things that we have building regulations in our county, and we actually can use our city and county resources to make sure that doesn't happen. And our resources, not so much in money, but in laws that we already currently have. So I'm running against Bob Hertzberg, who is termed out as a senator in California. He also termed out as an assembly. He's got some interesting things he wants to do as a candidate. One of the things he wants to do is he wants to pass a $25 billion bill that would cost the taxpayers a ton of money that own houses, and that includes apartment buildings. What he wants to do is he wants to create a down payment loan system through a bond measure. That means low-income families would be able to have a down payment loan for a down payment on a house for new construction only. What does that mean? That means that they're going to close things like the Whiteman Airport. Santa Monica is due to close in 2028, and they want to put low-cost housing in those areas. So that's a really big problem because the homeowners are going to pay for it in their property taxes. Imagine. So we have that gentleman. Then we have Senator Henry Stern. Now, both of these gentlemen were senators in 2018 when Senator Wiener passed a bill called SB 1045. SB 1045 is a law that will help us get the homeless off the street and get them in a housing situation for 1 year, which is put out by a judge. It's called the Conservancy. And what that means is these homeless people would be pulled off the street. They'd given complete services for 1 year. And if they're able to get out on their feet and get on their own, they would be out of that Conservancy. If not, then we could put them in permanent housing. But instead, we're doing permanent housing without getting them off the streets and getting them stable. So those two senators, Henry Stern and Bob Hertzberg, knew about that bill and have never implemented it and never done anything about it. That's a problem. So then we have Lindsay Harveth. Lindsay Harveth used to be on the city council and mayor of West Hollywood. So she's had an opportunity to do so many great things to help the West Hollywood community with their homeless problem and all the things that are facing the LGBT community. The LGBT community is one of the largest population of homeless, and they are the ones with the most problems in homeless encampments, and the problems are housing. She hasn't really done a lot, in my opinion, to help them. Then we have, who else do we have? Oh, we have Roxanne Beckford-Hoge. She's also running. She ran for state assembly in, I believe it was District 44. I'm not sure the exact district. She had 28,000 votes when she ran, and so she's put her hat in. And then I ran for California State Assembly in 2020. I was a write-in candidate. Would you believe 951 people knew my name and knew how to write my name correctly to get me on the ballot as a write-in candidate, right? So I ran against Jesse Gabriel, who is a lefty liberal. I ended up with 70,000 votes, of which 25,000 were registered Republicans. Only half of them voted. So I'm a Republican, and I ended up garnering 70,000 votes as a first-time candidate.
Wow.
So my message resonates, and it's not about whether you're Republican, Independent, or Democrat. This is a nonpartisan race, but my politics are all about homelessness. So my mother was a homeless, trafficked woman. That meant she was on the streets and she was trafficked for drugs. The reason why she ended up living 10 years longer than she probably should have is because she was dropped off at a hospital They stabilized her. They left her hospital band on and they threw her back in the street, which is illegal in the state of California. Police officers kept driving by and kept seeing her, and she was dying in the street. They picked her up. They took her back to the hospital. She was in San Diego. They forced the hospital to take her. They took her into ICU. She survived. Because she was homeless, they made her a conservancy of the state of California, and she lived 10 more years in a stabilized condition. So I know that SB 1045 can work if the LA County Supervisors would stop spending useless money on housing and start putting it in facilities. We have 3 facilities in LA County that could house a huge number of homeless people in stabilized conditions for 1 year. And then we can put them in the permanent housing. They've got it backwards. You can't put the cart before the horse. It's very important that we get someone like me on the board, because as someone who's had a homeless person, my mother was homeless. It'll be 10 years this May since she passed away, and she got 10 extra years of life in a safe environment. And, when homeless people tell you, I don't want to be off the street, I don't want a curfew, I want to live my life however I want to, well, they want to keep doing drugs. Okay, that's great, but why do we have to step in human fecal matter and human urine on the streets? My dog, if he defecates on the street, I get fined $100. A human being can do that on the street, and the cops don't do anything. They let him go. So why do we, who work hard, pay our taxes, want to dine on the streets in a beautiful weather here in California, have to be faced with stepping over people in the streets because they want their freedom to keep doing drugs? When we get them sober, maybe they can find a way to get a job and be a productive part of society. Boys and girls that are homeless are being trafficked, and we're not talking about it. We're not doing anything about it, and it's not the way that it should be. Here's the thing. You can harvest their votes, but they have to be a registered voter. And if they're not registered to vote with a place that they're getting their ballots, then the question then becomes, who's counting those votes and allowing them to go through? And that's where voter ID is so important. They're telling us that if I want to eat in a restaurant inside, I got to produce my Vax card and my driver's license. And I'm like, what? So I can go vote and tell you who I am, and you can't ask me for my ID. But I can't sit in a restaurant without being asked for a vaccine card and a driver's license to prove it's me. Think about that for a minute. So they can harvest the homeless. I just don't know how productive that would be. Let's talk about what's going on in Woodland Hills, right next door to my office. I have an office at 20121 Ventura Boulevard, Woodland Hills, Suite 307. Directly across the street from me is Taft High School. Right next door to me is 818 Motel, and next door to that is Extend a Stay. The LA County Supervisors are taking a grant fund from California and paying $30 million for 818 Motel to turn it into a family, temporary, semi-permanent housing for homeless families. Hope of the Valley is going to run that center, and after 15 years, they're going to get that property for free. So our taxpayer dollars are going to pay for that building, and in 15 years, he's going to own it for free to do with whatever he chooses.
Wow.
Okay, so let's think about that for 1 minute. Now let's talk about the Extend a Stay next door. Perfect corruption, exactly. The Extend a Stay next door right now has a program, and I don't know the exact name of the program, but what they do is they allow homeless to stay there, get cleaned up, and then they can stay for, I don't even know, like a couple of weeks. I'm not sure what it is. Friday, 10 days ago, it was on the news, they found a man that was bound behind his back, feet were bound, had been shot in the back of the head, and he was homeless and part of that program. They want to turn the extended stay into senior homeless living, next to a family living across the street from a high school. So now you need to ask yourself, why are we supposed to be okay with that? Why is Henry Stern, who's a senator in that area, okay with that? Why is it Bob Bloomfeld, who's a council member, all up for that and thinks it's wonderful? I've gotten emails from people that say to me, why don't you want to help the homeless? People, I am about helping the homeless. My mother was homeless. I'm all about, but we can't put them in housing until we stabilize them for a 1 year period of time through a conservancy of a judge, a state judge that says we need to make a conservancy for them, get them sober, get them stable, find out what their problems are. Some of these people have mental illness. So let me tell you another story. My twin sister was mentally ill. She suffered from mental illness, was never properly diagnosed. She had moved with her husband to Florida. lived with her in-laws. So let's talk about, if they're housed, they're fine. Are they? I got a phone call that my sister shot herself. So I'm thinking, okay, my sister shot herself. She probably shot herself in the foot. I know they use guns. What I didn't know was that her husband had been using crystal meth to stabilize her mental illness to deal with her. Had no idea. So I find out that she's been shot. It turns out she was shot in the back of the head, behind her ear. Now, my sister didn't come out here to the beach without putting her makeup on. So I find it hard to believe she shot herself in the back of the head. When the police showed up, if you can imagine an episode of hoarding, that's what this house looked like. Her in-laws were neatniks. Her in-laws were people that kept everything super clean and neat, okay? But they were in their mid to late 70s. They could not control what meth addicts do. So here they are, they're housed. My sister was shot in the back of the head. Her death certificate says suicide. He committed suicide 2.5 years later, shot himself in the heart for his daughter to find him in bed. I was on the phone when she called me and said that she thought he was dead, and she pulled the sheet back. So this is my family story, and these are all facts. You can look them up. It's not a lie. Both my family members, my twin sister and my mother, died 6 weeks apart. So I am very involved in how I think the homeless problem should be taken care of. And this is why. Because my sister had mental illness and she was housed. She was not stabilized in a traditional medical stance. She was not on the proper medication that could have had her lead a normal life, because for the most part she did, until her husband decided to do crystal meth and then put her on crystal meth too. So putting people that are homeless in housing does not work. But here's the thing. So they built 528 housing, okay? And the housing were those shipping containers. They're downtown in LA. Only 24 of them have residents in them. The rest of them are sitting empty, okay? So the question is, why are they empty? Why are they empty? And that's the problem. And I forget whose district it is, but she's one of the sitting LA County Supervisors. I think it's Mitchell. And I'm not exactly right. I'd have to look that one up. But she's got a whole sign up. She's all proud of herself. I go, they're empty. There's nobody in them. So if you're going to house family, why aren't you housing families down there when they're sober? But when you put them in the 818 motel next to us, my question is, if you have multiple kids in that family, where are they going to go to school? You have elementary students. Where are they going to school? How are you getting them to school? It's a 100-unit motel. How are you housing these people? And if you have a teenager that comes in using drugs, are you going to throw the whole family out? Are you going to take the child away from the parents and put them in a program? What are we going to do about this? Who's going to be responsible when these people leave that facility and are on the street doing drugs? Are you going to throw them out? Are they going to be camping in front of the street? Are you going to make that a no parking zone so they can't put their trailers in front of the streets? What are you going to do when they end up going on a drug binge and they're at the high school across the street? We don't have school police at LAUSD any longer. There's no more police on our schools. So now how are you going to solve that problem? There's nobody to help them. So I have a lot of questions about what they want to do. If it's such a great program, how come you don't have? Why aren't you pulling these people off the street, getting them sober, and sticking them in the housing? Maybe it's because you can get people sober. I put my mom through drug rehab 4 times. 4 times. She was never going to be sober. Never going to be sober. And she didn't want help. She put herself in a situation. We put her in housing. We got her apartments. We paid for them. And we were stuck in leases, and she was running the streets. She wanted to be there. Or she was getting thrown out because she had all these drug addicts hanging out in her apartment with her. I mean, these are real situations that occur. These are real things that happen. I'm a family member that's been through it. I understand how it works. And you'd be surprised how many families, people you know, are hiding the fact that they've got a homeless person or a drug addict in their family. They're hiding it. They're not talking about it. You don't know about it. And when I start telling my story, I will walk away from this mic, and anyone that's heard this interview, I guarantee someone will come up to me and say, my family member's been homeless. I understand what you're going through. And I tell the story of my twin sister for a reason, because when you look at her in-laws, their house looked like an episode of hoarding. There were pathways and the stench, and it smelled like going down to Skid Row, you know, the garbage, and meth addicts collect and they collect trash and they collect things. So then now you got to have a cleanup crew, because now it's inside and it's an unsanitary condition, including outside. So this problem isn't getting solved. And when you say something about what Einstein said about, doing the same thing is just creating insanity. If you look up the number of homeless we had in December of last year when they counted them, the number, I forget what the number was. It was like 50,000 or something. In January, they counted the homeless and we were up to 66,433. A couple weeks ago, they did a count. They haven't released the number yet. And I think it was done through LASA. So let's take a look at that number, because it sounds to me like the number of homeless are increasing, not decreasing. So what they're doing isn't working. What does that tell you? Their policies have failed. Their policies are not working. And you know what? I'm going to give a good shout out, a positive shout out to Senator Weiner. I'm not a fan of his. I don't like a lot of the bills that he's passed, but he was the one that wrote SB 1045, which is the Conservancy, and it is a pilot program for San Francisco County and LA County, and it is going to sunset in 2024. It is important that I get elected onto the LA County Supervisors District 3 board, and the reason being is I only have a year and a half before that sunsets to get these facilities open. The LA County supervisors blew away $1.2 billion on this housing that are empty. We have a facility in Santa Fe that is a lockdown style facility that could house the violent homeless people. You know, like the man that stabbed the Asian man down in downtown LA I think 2 weeks ago, and had those horrible lacerations in the back of his head. And what about the man or the woman that just got pushed off into the train tracks the other night in downtown LA by a homeless person? I mean, these are violent criminals that are homeless, and we're just saying, oh yeah, let them be homeless. It's okay. They should be homeless. They have a right to be homeless. Not when they're injuring the general public, and we don't know which ones they are. So that facility, if they open it up, they put the money in, they could help that homeless. And let's talk about how they want social workers to go out and help the homeless. There are social worker master's programs here in Los Angeles. You've got one at CSUN, you've got one at USC, one at UCLA, and several others that they don't have enough places to send the social workers going through their 2-year program to do their internships in order to complete their program. If they open that facility and the other empty building and fill the other one that's half full, these social workers could get these programs done. Imagine the programs they could get done, and they could get their hours and the amazing experience they would have to be able to do the work that they've chosen to do, to be social workers here in LA County. Imagine. So there's no downside to this. We've already passed the bond measure for $1.2 billion on taxpayers' dollars. So we're not adding money to it. And then there's more. But wait, there's more. Because in 2018, the president that we had in office, called President Trump, passed a law that anyone in a facility for mental incapacity, drug addiction, or alcohol abuse, if they were in a facility, the facility could apply for Medicare from ages 18 to 64, so long as they were in that facility. So imagine you can get federal funding to help oversee the costs so that the county didn't carry all of the burden. We're not using these programs because, and I'll give the LA County supervisors credit, they sent a demand letter to our governor. So in order for that federal money to be available, the California governor had to declare a state of emergency for homelessness, meaning that we had drug people, mental illness, and alcoholism, that we needed that funding. So if we could show we could get him off the street and he applied for that emergency funding, we'd have that money. They asked several times for the governor to give that federal funding, and he never would give it up. So we're not getting the federal funding because, again, our governor's not doing his job. There's also, we need to get me on the ballot. Only 2 people can go from June to November. So it's Jeffi, Jeffi, for FOR, supervisor.com. Jeffi for supervisor.com. Just remember my name and check the box that you'd like me to be your supervisor in District 3.